Just because you're not exactly where you want to be in life does not mean you're off track. So, I'm going to talk about my story today, share a little bit about my journey, interweave it into the story of Joseph, which is a biblical story that I've always loved. But as I keep rereading it, I get new insight and I'm able to match it to what I feel like is a relatable piece of the story. And so, I want to talk about when failure is actually alignment, right? So I've shared this before, but I remember being fired 2 times in the same year. Right. And it was shortly after I had gotten married. We had bought our first home and I felt like a failure. I didn't just feel like a failure, I was being judged like a failure. You can feel judgment oftentimes, but this wasn't just felt judgment. People would literally call me and ask me, when are you going to get a job? What are you going to do? So it wasn't just I was thinking it and it wasn't happening. I was definitely being judged as lazy. And so that was very hard because I also had my own idea of how life should go, right? I was like, I should be on this path, I should be doing this thing. But just because you're not on the exact path or track that you thought you would be on, it doesn't mean you're failing. And so I like to also talk about Joseph's story because Joseph had been hated because of his ambition and his dream. His own big brothers sold him into slavery. He was lied on, thrown into prison, all to end up second in command. So when you hear about the story of Joseph, you think, man, that's a lot. I don't know if I'd want to go through all of that. He wasn't on the path he thought he would be on, but it doesn't mean he was out of alignment, right? And so back to me and being fired. And so I was fired the first time. And so then I tried to work another job. I'm like, of course I should just, go pursue a job. Now, the whole time I did feel this urge to get back in school, work on my next degree, which ended up being like a bachelor degree. And I was like, but that just seems like a bad time, right? We had bought a home. It just felt like a really bad time to me. I didn't feel like I was in alignment with where I wanted to be, right? It didn't fit the narrative I had constructed for my own life. I didn't see it going down like that. When I got married, I thought, of course, I'll get married. We'll both work. This is how it'll go. We'll buy this. We'll do this. But that's just not always how it goes. But again, it doesn't mean that I was out of alignment. And so the setback of being fired twice was hard, but it had me to reevaluate the path that I was on. And so I was embarrassed, but I was also reflective. Now, I've always been someone who journaled. And so during this time, I would just journal. And a lot of what it looked like would be me just questioning my life, questioning my path, me praying through my journal, just why is this happening to me? Why am I here? What lesson am I supposed to be learning? And I thought like, man, I am just so far off track, right? An example is Joseph's story again. His setbacks caused him to reevaluate how and when he shared his dream. So when the story of Joseph first starts, you get the picture. He's his father's favorite. So you're the youngest and you're the favorite, right? He had a dream and he shared his dreams with his brothers. Now, Joseph again was young and a little bit naive. And so when he shared this dream, he didn't pray about it. He wasn't thinking about, a gift or God or when to speak on certain things, when to be quiet. He just opened his mouth. And I can relate to that. Sometimes what's causing us to be judged is we prematurely open our mouth about something, right? So I can relate to that. I remember saying it was probably in 2010. Oh, I feel like I've had a dream and God showed me one day I'm gonna teach. Well, that didn't happen until 2020. And so from the time I said it to 2020, I remember like the comments from certain people I had shared it with, like, well, when are you going to finally do that? When are you going to do something with your life? Why aren't you doing that? Right. It was my fault. Just because I had a dream did not mean it was time for me to share it. Because often what's shared with us in advance about our path, about our journey, isn't meant to be revealed yet. Joseph was the same way. He talked too much. He shouldn't have, blabbed that out. In a way, on the second side of that, you could argue that it set the events of his life on its path. So when he spoke up, he said that his brothers were offended by his dream and was like, "Oh, you're the favorite, and so now we're gonna all bow down to you too. We're not having it. We're tired of your crap, and so we're gonna do something about it, right?" So Joseph ended up being kind of like snatched, and sold into slavery by his brothers. But after he went through those hard setbacks, it started to humble him, right? And so in the beginning of the story, you see Joseph blabbing his dream. By the time we get to Joseph interpreting the dream of the cupbearer and the baker, his first initial response was only God can interpret dreams. And so from the time the story starts throughout his growth, we see character refinement. But that's a whole different point that I was going to make. My point is that the setback caused him to evaluate his life and when he shared certain things. My own setbacks caused me to evaluate when I opened my mouth to share certain things about my journey. Sometimes it's not to be shared yet because you're still going through it and the process has not finished. And if you prematurely share it, it's going to prematurely be judged, right? And so it's just one of those hard lessons that you can either read about someone else learning and learn how to be quiet, or you can find out, like myself, the hard way and talk too much. So next, about my journey, which was hard, was it all led to something unexpected and meaningful. So during the time I was fired, I was fighting against it. I got fired twice. I eventually was like, I'm feeling led to go back to school, so I'm gonna pursue that. And I did. And I didn't want to at the time. I really didn't, because I just felt this pressure of, okay, you've already done school. You're doing school again. That's a cop out. Why don't you just go do this? You can just work. I worked and went to school, but that's not my path. And it took me a long time to be okay with that, to be okay saying that's your journey, not my journey, right? And so I struggled during that time. I didn't want to do it. I reluctantly did it. And in the same way, I can see bits of Joseph's story, like in the same way. But to what I'm saying is, after he ended up on a path he didn't expect to be on, he humbled himself and he learned not to speak out of turn. He learned to give God the credit before he opened his mouth. He's not the interpreter of dreams. Even if he has the dream, he doesn't interpret his own dreams. He says, God interprets dreams, or this is the path and it's not my doing. So next, on this journey, it seemed hard. I felt like I was out of place, out of alignment. But it was during this time of me being fired back in school. I was also volunteering a lot. This is when I reconnected with my birth family. And so it was a very emotional moment, a very personally significant moment, right? But it wouldn't have happened for me if I would have followed what everyone else was telling me I should have been doing. And so by that, I mean, being fired, getting in school, it cleared a lot of space for me. So I was in school and I was focused, but then I had time at home. Since I was at home, I was studying. I had the time to investigate what I needed to try to even find my birth family, to reconnect to them. But had I listened to everyone else, I wouldn't have had that space and the capacity to do so. And this is extremely important, right? Because without the space to do so, I wouldn't have, right? And for my life, I can't speak for other people. For my life, timing was of the essence, and it was very important that I do it exactly when I was supposed to. Because when I found my family and reconnected to them, 1 year later, my husband had a job opportunity to open up, and we moved 13 hours away from where I was originally from. So me connecting to my family during the season I was supposed to was God's divine time and order. I had to ignore what people thought they knew about what I should be doing to pursue what God was telling me to do. It didn't look traditional. It looked like it was crazy. I looked like I was lazy. People judged me. It looked like I should just be doing this. And what am I doing? And you're out of alignment. Whole time I was in alignment. I just didn't realize it fully. It actually took me a long time, even beyond reconnecting to my family, to look back and realize I was in alignment and on the right path. That took years for me to realize, right? I still had a lot of shame, even though I had reconnected with my family. I still felt shame. I felt like I should have been working. I felt like when I was working, it was a different type of work that I didn't know I would have to do, which is a different video for a different day. And it was the work of healing. And for me, you're talking about 3 decades of separation from my birth family. That wasn't going to heal in 3 months, 3 days, or even 3 years. It took me years to walk through my healing. And so, again, I wouldn't have been able to do this if I hadn't had the space. It required a lot of emotional capacity. And Joseph's path is similar, right? Because he ended up reconnecting back with his family, but only when it was time. Joseph ended up separated from his family for about 25 years. That is a long time. From the time he was 17 to all of the events that took place, to him becoming second in command and his family having to come to Pharaoh, to him really, to get rations so that they wouldn't starve and die. God put Joseph in a different place. And it was about more than just Joseph and his family. It was about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other people. And so Joseph had to walk through his journey, right? He had to realize, I need to think before I share something. A lot of different things, a lot of character refinement took place. Next, I want to share about dealing with judgment. So again, being fired, having been a newlywed, and just going through my life and the journey like it was, I was doubted and judged a lot, right? And I had to learn how to just not care about other people's opinions more than I cared about being in alignment and on the journey I was supposed to be on, right? And what that looked like was having to hear what someone was saying, but not over internalize it, having to take it into consideration, like, okay, then maybe they're telling me something I should think about, thinking about it, and then releasing it. I had to stay focused on my path. Again, it was very time sensitive, but I didn't know it at the time. So I found my family, I reconnected with them. A year later, like literally like around 1 year later, me and my husband lived in a whole different state. So the timeline to that, the processing, the meeting the family, all of these things took place, and boom, we were gone. And I'm thankful that it happened before I moved. I don't know after moving if I would have had the same space, right, to process this. I was judged as lazy, and I was healing, and it wasn't time. I think I shared this earlier. The thing about it was, this was a very personal process, and it wasn't time for me to broadcast what was really going on with me or to over justify myself. Now, this is the hard part. When people accuse you of being lazy or entitled or you could do more, I had to do it, why didn't you got to do it? And all these things start flying at you. My personal first instinct is to start defending myself. When I tell you defending myself was one of those things that God really had to work with me on, I had to let it go. Because for certain people, they've already passed judgment on you. It doesn't matter what you say in your own defense. They've already deemed and judged you however they want to. It is nothing you can say to lift that judgment, because they don't want to lift it. Because whole time they was hating on you anyway. Whole time they were mad at you for being you. You didn't know it, but that's just what it was whole time, right? So you can fight, you can try to defend yourself. You're really just wasting time. I'm trying to help you out. You're wasting time trying to overly defend your decisions and your positions to people who have already stamped whatever judgment they wanted on you. That's it, right? It just wasn't time for me to talk about it in depth because it was still happening. I was still healing. This process took me about a decade. This isn't a quick process that I'm talking about. Like, I'm on here and I'm talking and it seems quick, but it was not, right? It took years of walking through this, of healing, to even be able to start articulating any of it. I mean, I just was not able at first to put it into words. Joseph is going back to Joseph's life. Okay, he ended up working for somebody, a high prominent position. Now, this was before he ended up as second in command under Pharaoh. He ended up working for someone else, high position. It was going fine until he refused the advancement of his boss's wife and was thrown into prison as if he had done something. He did the right thing and then was thrown into prison like he had not done the right thing. Like, again, he's in prison. Now you're judged as a criminal, right? It doesn't even matter what you say. You are in prison. People think what they want to think about you. You know, you could be like, I'm innocent all day and night, like I was just sharing, but people have already stamped their judgment over you. And so I'm sure Joseph had a process in that where he gets to prison and then he has to learn how to accept where he is, how to understand that he's being judged, and how to just move forward anyway, right? But he was judged, even though the judgment was not true. I can relate to that. People can think what they want. They've already decided what they think about you. And you know, it might not be true. It's not your battle to fight. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's taken me a long time to stop trying to fight the battle of self-defense when people have already judged me. Next, the outcome. So moving forward on your own path. So those seasons, specifically the one where I was fired, I found my family. It was very isolating. I felt, judged, but I still found my family. Now, I didn't really care about being judged more than I cared about reconnecting and finding my family. That's another thing. Which one weighed the most? For me, it was identity and reconnection. And so I had to get to a point where I just released the judgment of whoever thought whatever and embraced what I thought was most important, right? But this season prepared me to disconnect from one place, which is the place I had been raised, and move 13 hours away and be able to have the space to connect to the next place. Initially, I felt isolated. I felt lonely. I realized it was more about me starting a process of disconnection so I could leave that place. Sometimes when it gets lonely and you look around and you can't find a friend or you don't, like, why am I so alone? Maybe you're being prepared for the next thing. It may or may not be a physical move. Maybe it's just the next thing. And you need the space to prepare without the opinions of people who think they know what's best for you or who think that they know the path you're supposed to be on. And that's a hard place to be in. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's something that I had to learn to walk through. So it prepared me for the next place. And for Joseph, his journey was long. I mean, 25 years, sold into slavery, had a good boss, lied on, put in prison, honey, interpreted dreams for the cupbearer and the bread maker. Was like, don't forget about me to the cupbearer. I think the bread maker, the interpretation of his dream was he was gonna be executed. But the other guy lived. Joseph, don't forget about your boy. I interpreted your dream. When you get out, holler at me. Blah 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 blah. Now, dude forgot about him until Pharaoh had a dream and no one could interpret it. And then he was like, oh yeah, was in prison. You know what I'm saying? In prison. Dude interpreted my dream for me, forgot about him. Pharaoh, immediately, go get him now. Okay? Because Pharaoh was losing sleep. He didn't have no peace. He needed answers. Whole time, Joseph was just stuck and waiting for his season. It's a whole different video series that I don't know if I'm supposed to get into right now. But my point is that he was being prepared to be second in command, right? He had to disconnect from a lot, literally from his family. Then he had a prominent role. He had to disconnect from that. He went to prison. When Pharaoh called for him, they cleaned him up. Boom. One day you in prison, the next day you wake up second in command in the palace in this elaborate, beautiful place. I mean, now we talk about PTSD. Now we talk about anxiety. Now we talk about transitions. I don't know if they were talking about it back then, but this all sounds like really hard to wake up in prison one day and that evening you dining with Pharaoh. This is a whole different video series. Let me say that again. Back to my point. Joseph was prepared, right? Um, he also, and this is something that I started looking at. Joseph's life was being prepared for him to serve as second in command because a famine hit the world. And so that means Joseph was placed somewhere not only for himself and his family, but for the world, people that knew God and didn't know God. God was concerned about everyone starving. And so he placed Joseph as second in command so that he could be over the food, the grain, the storage systems, so that everybody wouldn't starve and die when this famine hit. Now that's huge. That's a different video. Again, I guess I got a lot of videos I need to be making. But I keep saying it's a different video. Today, I just want to encourage you though, trust your process, right? Even when others don't understand it, others could be you, even when you don't understand it. Trust your process and keep walking forward. Some days, that's all you can do is just keep going forward to get to the next day, to get to the end or the answer, right? And so, I'm going to include some reflection questions like, have you ever felt pressured to follow a path that didn't feel right for you? Again, I felt pressured and I was like, well, maybe I should be doing this thing. Have you ever experienced that yourself, right? And what did you do about it? What's a moment in your life where something seemed like it was a setback, but it led you to something better? Again, I got fired twice. You talking about a setback. Ego blow, right? Shame, all that. Like, not twice in the same year. Sometimes you get fired, maybe you get fired the next year. No, 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 no. I got fired twice in the same year. I shared this. I also got held back in basic training twice. See that theme? Those 2 times? You talking about shame. You talking about feeling like a failure and feeling out of alignment. Not just feeling it, looking like it too. And on display for all to see, right? Even when I didn't graduate college on time, different video, different day, on display for everyone to see and judge. And so it can feel like things are a setback. When I didn't finish school, originally when I had, planned to finish school, I was like, man, I'm behind. I ended up dropping out for like a year, working full time. It was one of my mentors that was like, you need to go finish school. And I said to her, you need to pay for it. And she said, go down there and call me, right? From the registrar's office, and I'll go ahead and get you back rolling. And oh no, she called my bluff because that's exactly what she did. But that was a very hard season for me. I ended up finishing, not when I thought I would. It was like 2 years later. I finished. I got engaged the same day I graduated college. That's a different story for a different day. And then I started my life and started working on my MBA. I was on orders on the base, and I just kept going. But the season where I thought I was going to finish school and didn't, I looked like a fairy, was just at home with not much to do, looking for a job, finally found one. Again, another season of what looked like a setback really being something that propelled me forward, but I didn't understand it at the time. That'll be a different video. So yeah, definitely answer those journal prompts that I just said. What's a moment where something seemed like a setback, but it led you to something better? Have you gotten to the something better yet? You could have a setback and maybe it hasn't been enough time for you to even, the fullness or the revelation hasn't even come through, where you go from, oh, this was a setback, to, oh, this was great. Maybe you still inching towards the answer to the setback. And that's also okay. That would be that in-between season. And that's also a very needed and pivotal time of development, refinement, and processing. That's a whole different video. I probably just spit about 5 different video series I could talk about in this one video today. So I'm Kimberly. Thank you for joining me. And I'm going to try to remember to put the journal prompts in the description. I can't sometimes suck at that and forget, but I'm going to be very mindful of that. So see you next time.